They told you ships were made to cross oceans, that their purpose was to conquer distance, to carry warriors from one shore to the next. But what if one ship, the oldest ever carved by Viking hands, was never meant to touch water? The wind moves softly tonight, like an echo from a dream you almost remembered. And somewhere, under moss and thyme, something carved from black pine still waits. Not wrecked, not broken, preserved, hidden. They say it lies in a bog, where even ravens fall silent. A place the locals call Stillwater, though no map remembers it now. No rivers flow there, no birds nest. Just fog, and a silence so thick it feels alive. You were never supposed to find it, but you did. You followed the wrong path, or maybe the right one. Your boots sank deeper with each step, the ground no longer earth but memory. And then, the curve of something impossible. Wood where no tree stands, nails where no hands have hammered in 1,000 winters. A hull, blackened not by fire but by age and intent. It was upside down, as if the sky was the sea it meant to sail. You knelt, you touched the ribs of the vessel, and your fingers came back marked, not with dirt, but with ash. But there had been no flame, only the cold, and a heartbeat you swore wasn't your own. Who built this? They say the first shipwrights were not craftsmen, they were dreamers, not with tools, but with trance. They carved not from lumber, but from silence. They didn't measure length, they measured weight of souls, and this ship, the one you touched, was made not to move, but to hold. What? You turn back, but the path is gone. Behind you, mist. Ahead, the stern of the ship, rising like a question from the mud. There's something carved into the inside curve of the prow. Words you cannot read, not runes, not script. Symbols that feel more like sounds than sight. They hum when you blink, they pulse when you breathe. You reach into the hollow and find cloth, ancient and dry, impossibly dry, wrapped around something. Leather, mask-shaped, no eye holes. You don't understand. Not yet. But something in you does. Because this isn't the first time you've seen this ship, not in waking life, but in dreams, when you were small, the ones you forgot every morning but never stopped feeling. Dreams of floating in nothing, and someone whispering, "The sky is not above you, it is behind you." They called it Skeldvinna, the shell that guards. That name doesn't appear in any saga. The church burned every scroll that dared mention it, but the name still floats beneath the language, in lullabies, in wind, in the half-said syllables old women mutter in sleep. This ship was not meant to carry bodies. It was meant to trap them, not the living, not the dead, but something that tried to become both, and then forgot how. They buried it in the bog, not to preserve it, but to silence it, because it still speaks, not in words, but in absence, not in sound, but in pressure, like a voice that remembers being a god, and no longer knows what silence means. You pull the mask closer. Inside, feathers, and bone dust, and something else. A thin string tied in a knot your fingers undo before your mind realizes. The air changes, the water stirs, and beneath your feet, something shifts. Not earth, not ship, not wood, but memory. Something just remembered you. We'll show you, but not yet. Something just remembered you, and the air hasn't been the same since. You didn't mean to take the mask, but your hands moved on their own, as if they knew, as if they had done this before. You wrapped it in your coat, not to hide it, but because the air shifted when it touched the wind, as if the air itself recoiled. Your boots dragged through mud that no longer stuck. The bog, once thick and still, seemed to part, but not to welcome you. No, more like something beneath it had begun to stir, like breath under blankets, or thought behind silence. You kept walking, or were you being led? Every step forward felt less like distance and more like descent, not into depth, but into time. And with each step, your memories thinned. You forgot why you came, then you forgot where you were going, and then you forgot what your name felt like in your mouth. But you remembered the ship. You always remembered the ship. A voice, not quite heard, throbbed in the space behind your ribs. It didn't speak in words. It struck like a drum, a rhythm of forgetting. 3 beats, then stillness, then 3 again, a pattern, a calling. There had been a name for this rhythm once. The old shamans knew it. They didn't write it down, because it couldn't be spoken. Only walked, only followed. And you were walking it now. You reached a clearing where no trees grew, just stone, split, cracked, ancient, but clean, as if someone had just peeled back the moss. On the flattest stone, a circle had been carved, not etched, carved deeply, with purpose. Inside it, a spiral, and within the spiral, a single line of text, again, not in any alphabet known to man. You set the mask down in the centre. You don't know why, but the moment you do, the wind stops, not slows, stops. The trees freeze mid-motion, as if time itself forgot to flow, and that's when the whisper begins, not outside you, inside, between your breaths, between your thoughts, like a memory not yours, but one that borrowed your body to feel itself again. It was never built to sail, it was built to bind. It was never carved from tree, but from pact. Pact. You blink, and in that blink, the clearing is gone. You're not standing anymore. You're inside a hall. The roof beams are ribbed like the hull of a ship turned on its back. Smoke coils upward in slow motion. Faces surround you, pale, distant, unmoving, not hostile, not kind. Watching, wearing nothing, no clothes, no names. Just eyes. One of them steps forward. She is tall. Her skin is the colour of bone ash. Her voice arrives before her lips move. Why did you take it? You don't answer. You don't know how. Your mouth won't shape words. But she hears your silence. She nods, almost gently. Then you have chosen. Chosen what? But she's already turning, walking toward a dark doorway behind the stone seats. Her voice trails behind her. Not spoken, but engraved into the walls of your mind. The Skeldvinner was never meant for waves. It is not a ship. It is a question. And now, it is open. You follow her. You have no choice. The hallway narrows. The floor softens. You realize it's no longer stone. It's wood. And it curves upward. You're inside the ship. But it's not in the bog anymore. You're no longer in your world. Something waits ahead. Not a person, not a god. Something that forgot how to die. And you just woke it up. You just woke it up. And now the ship is no longer wood. It's memory. The curve of the hull breathes. Every board beneath your steps shivers. Not from weight, but recognition. You are not walking through a vessel. You are being read by it, as if your bones carry a language the ship remembers. You try to stop, but your body keeps moving. Ahead, a doorway shaped like a mouth opens wider with each step. You don't know if you're being welcomed or swallowed. And then you hear it. Not the whisper this time. A voice, low, male, but wrong. Not deep like thunder, deep like echo, like something speaking from behind your thoughts. You cross the water, but not with oars. You turn. The pale woman is gone. The hallway has become too narrow to return. Only forward now. The voice again. You brought the mask. Did you wear it? No. You think. Not yet. But something in you answers differently. Yes, because your eyes still burn. Not from smoke, but from seeing too far, too fast. You blink and the hallway becomes shoreline. Black sand. A sky like melted obsidian. And the ship, above you now, not below, hanging, inverted, suspended by nothing. That's when you understand. It's not the ship that waits. It's what sleeps inside it. It has no shape, just suggestion, a heaviness in the world, like a thought the earth is trying to forget. You see it, not with eyes, but with instinct, a void tied in place by 1,000 unseen threads, and the threads are weakening. They carved me into wood so I would forget. The voice is closer now, inside the ribs of the ship, behind the warped beams, behind the veil you didn't know was a veil. I taught them time. I taught them forgetting. I gave them silence. and they used it to hide from me. A flicker. You see a memory, not yours, pressed against your vision. A circle of warriors naked but for paint. A chant, not of words, but of breath patterns. One kneels. He wears the mask. His hands hold a rope woven from 3 colors, blood red, ash white, and raven black. They lower something into the hull. Not a coffin, not a body, a sealed box, bone carved, clamped shut with antler pins. It was not prophecy I gave them. It was a way out. You stagger. The deck beneath you shifts, not breaking, but yielding, like muscle. The ship is changing. You realize this isn't a vessel for travel. It's a prison built as ritual, a myth turned object, a containment shaped like faith. And someone, maybe you, just cracked it. From the shadows, another figure appears. He looks like you, but older, not in years, in weight. His eyes reflect fire that isn't there. He speaks your name, not the name your parents gave you, the older one, the one you've only heard in dreams, carved into wind and frost. We are the ones who remember what must not be sung, and you sang it. You want to ask why, but the ship answers first, with sound, a groan that isn't heard. It's felt, like mountains shifting, like the spine of the world cracking to stretch. And then, a single word, one syllable, from a language no longer spoken, but understood by every cell of your body. It means, begin again. And the mask in your coat, it's gone. You're wearing it, but you never lifted it. It clings to your skin like memory, not tight, just inevitable, as though your face had always waited to be covered. You try to speak, but there is no mouth, not outside, not inside, only breath, and even that, borrowed. The ship groans again, that same sound older than language, not wood, not metal, but burden, a noise made by something once chained now starting to shift. Stretch, awaken. The air vibrates with pressure, with presence, and something sees through the mask. Not you, not them, but it. You're no longer walking. You're floating through layers of time, of self, of sky that forgot it was sky. Below you, visions spiral, not dreams, more like confessions the world made before it had lips. You see a child in a forest, drawing circles in frost with her breath. You see old men burning books not because they feared knowledge, but because they feared reminder. You see temples beneath ice, humming with sound no mouth ever shaped. And then, you see them, the ones who carved the ship. They were not called Vikings then. They had no word for themselves, only for what they carried. They called it Draumvaka, the dream that wakes the dreamer. They believed the world was not a place, but a question, and the only answer was forgetting. So they built the Skeldvinna, not to move forward, but to hold still, to keep the question from becoming too loud. But the bindings only last as long as belief, and belief has thinned. The voice returns, not the echo, not the woman, not the older you. This time, it is the ship itself. They used my body to hold what could not die. They fed me silence and sealed me with names, but they forgot the most dangerous thing. A pause, and then the mask tightens. Names do not fade, they wait. You fall, back into the ribs of the ship. But now, everything is wrong. The wood is glowing, not with light, with memory. Faces shimmer in the planks, not carved, not painted, imprinted, as if everyone who ever touched the ship, every sacrifice, every chant, every forgotten prayer, left a trace. And they are all looking at you, because you wore the mask, because you remembered the path, because the bindings have begun to loosen. The figure, the other you, steps closer. He holds something in his hand, a mirror, but it's not glass, it's ice, black ice, carved into a circle. He shows you your face, except it's not yours. The mask is now your skin. Where your eyes were, only darkness. Where your mouth was, a spiral. And within that spiral, something breathes. He speaks. You are not the jailer. You are the key. The ship trembles. No, not the ship, the seal. This whole place, this entire illusion of vessel and voyage, was the lid of something buried too deep to name. And now it opens. You hear it not in sound, but in memory. A name, not spoken aloud for 1,000 winters, a name that bends the world when heard. And somehow it's yours. But not the name you use, not the one spoken over coffee, or scribbled on paper, or typed on forms. This one came first, before vowels, before breath. It doesn't sound in your ears, it rings through your bones. And the moment you hear it, or rather, remember it, everything shifts. The ship is gone, the ice mirror shatters, and the spiral where your mouth once was opens, not like flesh, like gate. A wind erupts, not from outside, but from you. A wind filled with voices, some pleading, some laughing, some screaming not in pain, but in recognition, like long-lost parts of yourself suddenly coming home. The man, the one who looked like you, is no longer standing. He's kneeling, and behind him, all those silent faces in the walls begin to bow, not in worship, not in fear, in remembrance, because you are not new, you are not chosen, you are returned. The mask no longer separates you from them, it connects. The spiral spins inward now, pulling the light from the chamber, not into darkness, into clarity. You see the bindings that once held the thing, you, in place. Runes etched in forgotten grammar, circles that overlap in ways geometry never intended, words buried inside other words. Each one cracks, like eggshells, and the thing at the center of it all, the question, the silence, the why, begins to rise. It does not have form, it has intention, and it chooses you to wear it again, because you did once, and when you let it go, the sky itself fractured. That was the first forgetting, the first exile, the first time you let them build churches instead of remembering the sea, the first time you agreed to be small. But now you remember the tide. You remember the name carved into frost, into bone, into the wind on mountaintops no longer mapped. You speak, not in language, but in permission. The air folds, the chamber collapses, not in violence, in return. Everything folds into the spiral. And then silence, not absence, but completion. You wake, but not in the bog, not in the ship. You wake beneath a sky with no stars, only one crescent line, glowing, soft like breath, and the sound of water that doesn't move. You're standing on ice, thin, silver, endless. The mask is gone. Your hands are marked with symbols now. They pulse faintly. Not tattoos, seals, opened, and before you, a door, freestanding, carved from driftwood. No hinges, no handle. Just an opening carved with a single question. Do you still remember how to drown? Because to enter what waits next, you cannot carry breath. You cannot carry name. You must become forgetting. Again. Do you still remember how to drown? The words hover, not etched in the wood, but into your mind, as if they were always there, waiting for you to return to this moment, this doorway, this choice. You step closer. The ice beneath your feet doesn't crack. It exhales. A breath older than lungs, colder than memory. And in that exhale, something deep inside you loosens. You remember the first time you drowned, not in water, in time. You were not a body then. You were a sound, too loud to bear, folded into flesh so the world wouldn't break. But the sea remembered, and now it calls you home. You reach out. The driftwood isn't cold, it's warm, not like fire, like pulse, because it is alive, not wood, not artifact. It's a rib, from something that still sleeps beneath the ocean that no longer has a name. Your hand touches it, and your body remembers what drowning means. Not death, not fear, surrender. And that's when the door opens, not outward, not inward. It opens through you. Your breath vanishes. not stolen, given. Your name disbands like mist, and for a moment you are nothing, and in that nothing you are everything you forgot. The ocean rushes in, not waves, memory. You're back inside the Skeldvinner. But now you see what it truly was. Not a ship, not a tomb. It was a map to the space between worlds, the seams where stories leak, where silence becomes form, and the ones who built it didn't build it to trap. They built it to contain the question long enough for someone to answer it. And you were the answer, or maybe the mistake. That part remains unclear. You fall again, but there's no fear now, only echo, only weightless descent into the place beneath language. The sea accepts you, and in its blackness, voices, not many, just one, yours, before it was yours, before it split into thought and skin and self, and it says, the mask was only the beginning. Now you wear the ship. Your skin becomes wood, your ribs, beams, your spine, keel, your breath, wind. You are no longer the one who walks the path. You are the path, a vessel for memory, for forgetting, for the unspoken contract between sleep and waking. You hear footsteps on your deck. Someone walks inside you, not just anyone, a child, small, barefoot, eyes wide with the same question you once carried. She kneels, places something at the center of your ribbed floor, a mask, but it's not yours. It's older, cracked, and something inside it breathes. The spiral opens again, but not inside you, inside her, and you know, the Skeldvinner did not carry bodies, it carried cycles, and this is one, of many, endless, recurring. And now, your part is nearly done, but not yet, because something still stirs beneath your planks, a name you never dared say, a shape you never dared remember, and soon it will rise again. The shape beneath your planks pulses, not with life, but with recognition, not new breath, but old permission. It knows you're ready, or that you were never meant to resist. You feel it stir, the sealed presence, the deep knot tied before time was named, the one they hid beneath your boards, beneath your name, beneath the stories that made you forget. And now, the child with the cracked mask kneels in your center. She does not look afraid. She looks remembered. The spiral within her glows faintly, not bright like fire, but warm like the last word before sleep. Her fingers trace the ridges in the wood, not idly. She's reading you, like a map, like a spell, because you were never just a ship. You were a seal, a lock, a final defense against what slumbers too far beneath speech, and she's unlocking you, not with violence, with grace. Each movement of her hand releases another strand, and with each release you recall a face, not hers, not yours, but theirs, the ones who made you. You see them again now, the bone-painted shamans, standing in a circle, chanting not with mouths but with wounds, letting their blood drip in a pattern only the sea understood. They didn't build you to contain a monster. They built you to hold regret, a god who made a mistake, who whispered too much, who loved the mortals more than silence allowed, and for that they unmade him, but not completely. Pieces remained, a name, a breath, a spiral, and a voice, yours. You feel it returning now. The child lifts the mask, not to wear it, to offer it, to the shape rising through your floorboards, and that's when you see it, the forgotten one, neither man nor beast, not form, but consequence. Its face is unfinished, because it's waiting for you to finish it, with your memory, with your surrender, and you do, because you were not the key, you were the vessel, and vessels are meant to be filled. The entity climbs through you, not as an invasion, but as completion. It wears your voice like a robe. It speaks. The cycle ends where it begins. The child bows her head. The ice around you begins to crack, not shatter, but bloom. Fractures like flowers, petal by petal, forming paths not across the water but beneath it, and through each fracture a name escapes. Not a god, not a devil, just Truth, the kind that cannot live in temples, the kind that cannot be spoken aloud, only carried by ships, by masks, by you. And as the spiral within your chest finally closes, you remember, you were never meant to sail. You were meant to sleep. Until now, until her, until this. The spiral inside you closes, not in ending, but in sealing. And in that sealing, the presence within you becomes still, not silent, not gone, just waiting again. The bloom of cracks on the ice spreads outward in perfect symmetry, not random, designed, as though the very structure of reality had remembered its oldest pattern. And through those fractures the sea does not rise. It listens. The child stands now, her hands covered in dust, not from earth, but from memory. She doesn't look back at you, the ship, the seal, the mask. She looks forward, into a light that is not bright, but deep, a light that doesn't blind, a light that asks. And she answers by stepping forward, onto the path of fractures, blooming like veins beneath her. Each step she takes is mirrored by soundless thunder beneath the ice, as if the ocean has begun to breathe again. You feel it in your ribs, in your keel, in your name, and something in you whispers a truth so old, no voice dares carry it. You were never built to hold the end. You were built to carry the one who would restart the question, and that one is her. You watch as the glow ahead grows taller, takes shape, not a throne, not a temple, an arch, woven from bone and branch, frost and echo. It hums with a pulse you remember from before time, before thought, the first rhythm, the breath that sculpted stars, and it calls her. No words, just invitation. She pauses beneath it, places the cracked mask at its base, the spiral facing outward, the breath within it now still, not dead, transferred. And then she speaks. 3 words, in a language you never learned but always knew. They don't translate, but they mean, I remember you. The arch responds. It opens, not like a door, but like an eye, wide, unblinking, aware. She walks through, and the world folds, not around her, around you, because your part is done. But the story has only just begun. You feel yourself becoming less, not fading, releasing. Your ribs return to wood. Your breath dissolves into mist. Your eyes, which were never really eyes, close again, and you return to where it started, to still water, to the bog, to the moss-covered hull, upside down, waiting for a dream to remember itself. The ship sleeps once more, but now it dreams of her, and somewhere, far away, or perhaps impossibly near, a temple that was never built begins to appear, stone by stone, step by step, not rising, returning, because truth was never lost, only delayed. And the next vessel? She will not forget, and because she remembers, the earth begins to rewrite itself, not in fire, not in flood, but in weight. Stone reappears where there was once only. Wind. Foundations emerge like teeth through skin. And atop a hill no map has marked in centuries, the temple that never was, becomes. It does not rise. It unfolds, as if it had always been there, folded beneath time's eyelid, waiting for a single blink of recognition. Inside her, the child who crossed through the spiral now walks as someone new, not older, not taller, just more. She carries no tools, no scrolls, no banner, only silence. But it is a silence filled with shape, with meaning, with a memory the world itself seems eager to cradle again. She enters the temple, no doors, no walls, just air, still, sacred, aware, and in its center, a pedestal, carved from a wood that no longer grows, shaped like a heart turned inside out, a place not for offerings but for reminders. She kneels, and from beneath her cloak she lifts something you didn't see her take, a piece of the ship, no longer wood, now bone, polished smooth, etched with spiral and ash mark, like the echo of a rib still listening. She places it upon the pedestal, the temple exhales, and from the shadows figures appear, not men, not gods, not ghosts, echoes of every keeper who came before her, tall, slender, faceless, shimmering with breath but no body. They form a circle, arms at their sides, heads bowed, not in reverence but in remorse, because they remember too. They remember what they sealed, what they sacrificed, and what they lost when they tried to contain the uncontainable. The girl lifts her hands, not in prayer, in recognition. The spiral on her palm glows faintly, and with it, the mask at the archway reawakens. It does not move. It remembers. The breath within it swirls once, twice, then holds. The air in the temple turns heavy, not with fear, but with promise. The girl speaks. You buried the question. She turns to face the echoes. But you never answered it. None of them respond, but the spiral on the bone shard pulses, as if it agrees. And then, a voice. Not hers, not theirs, yours. Ask it. The girl nods, closes her eyes, and says the oldest question the world has ever known. What came before forgetting? The echoes vanish, the mask cracks, and the earth holds its breath, because the question has finally been spoken by the one born not to bind it, but to carry it through. And the answer, it does not come in words, it comes in warmth, a wind that sweeps through the temple and out across the sea, touching every bone buried in ice, every rune lost to moss, every whisper sealed inside forgotten stones. The Skeldvinna stirs again, not to rise, not to sail, to listen, because this time it is not carrying the silence, it is carrying the reply. The wind that moves across the sea is not weather, it's remembrance. It touches moss-covered graves that never had names. It stirs the breath in monks who never broke their vows. It caresses the edge of a glacier where something sleeps with one eye half open. And now it blinks. Everywhere it touches, something loosens, not breaks, not collapses, but releases. And deep beneath the temple, beneath the foundation that was not stone but promise, the bones begin to hum, not from vibration, from agreement. The echoes that vanished return, not as figures, but as roots. They stretch from the girl's feet outward, through time, through ash, through songlines long erased. She does not move. She simply remains. Because she understands now, the reply is not a sound. It is a presence, and it's not coming. It's already here. The pedestal begins to pulse. The bone fragment she placed there starts to melt, not into water, but into pattern. The spiral uncoils, not as symbol, but as path, and as it uncoils, so does you. Not the ship, not the voice, you, the one who first wore the mask, the one who asked the question, the one who became silence because no one dared speak. You are no longer sealed, you are no longer slumbering, you are rising, but not with fire, not with vengeance, with weightless memory. You take shape in the air above the girl, not as a god, not as a ghost, as a shadow with heartbeat. She looks up, and she smiles. Not because she's unafraid, because she knew. She always knew this moment was waiting, like a note in a song that everyone hums but no one sings. Your shape drifts down, wraps her like mist. She does not run. She opens her arms. And together, you remember, the temples before stone, the gods before shape, the name before language, and you say it, together, not aloud, into the world itself, a pulse, a shift, and the temple bursts into bloom, petals of light, walls turning to breath, ceiling fading into sky, the archway unfolding into constellations that were erased from history, now re-etched in stardust, and every sealed thing in the world feels it. The old knowledge is waking, not as danger, as balance. The sea stills, the Skeldvinna exhales, its final dream released. The mask dissolves into wind, and the girl, no longer girl, stands alone. But she's not empty. She is carrying the reply, a name that is not hers, a voice that is not human, a memory that is not past. She steps out of the temple, and everywhere her foot falls the world remembers its original question, not who are we, but what were we before forgetting, and in the stillness that follows, the answer begins to bloom, not fast, not loud, but undeniably, like mist over old stones, like ink returning to a page long thought blank. Where her foot touches the soil, patterns rise, not carved, revealed, spirals, runes, shapes once used to whisper with the stars, forgotten by history, remembered by the land. The world, it seems, was never silent, only waiting for someone to listen. She walks, not toward a goal, toward a place of resonance, a coastline long erased from maps, where cliffs rise like sleeping giants, and the wind speaks in tones only the bones can hear. The sea greets her with stillness, no waves, just a mirrored surface stretching forever, reflecting not sky, but memory. And beneath the surface, something stirs. It does not rise, it does not roar, it simply remembers her. Because she is not a girl anymore. She is the bridge, the vessel, the one who carries the reply across the span of forgetting. And she has reached the edge of that span. Here, the spiral ends, or begins again. She kneels at the shoreline, places her hand into the water. It accepts her not like a sea, like a wound recognizing its scar. The tide pulls gently, not to drag but to invite, and beneath her fingers the sand glows. Not bright, just true. A shape emerges, buried, bone-like, familiar, the Skeldvinner, but not the one you knew. Another, older, more whole, its ribs still intact, its form untouched by fire or moss or forgetting. It never sailed, because it never had to. It was waiting, for her, for you, because even memory, when carried far enough, loops. She climbs aboard, not as a passenger, as a keeper. Her fingers trace the wood, and the ship responds. It sighs, it dreams, and this dream is different. This one moves forward. The sea parts, not violently, like a book that's been waiting for centuries to be read. And in that parting, voices, not many, just one, yours, but not from behind, from within, because the reply wasn't something she carried back to you. It was what she awakened in you. You speak, but not through lips. You become the sky. She remembers. So I am. The Skeldvinner lifts, not with wind, but with will. It does not sail. It crosses, across waters that were never wet, toward shores that were never land, into a place no myth dared describe. Because this is not a destination. It is a rejoining of echo and source, of vessel and sea, of question and its forgotten, forbidden, unfinished answer. And still she stands at the prow, silent, certain, ready, but not to conquer, to return. The Skeldvinner glides forward, not through water but through knowing. The sea beneath it no longer reflects the world above, it reflects the one beneath it. Symbols swirl beneath the surface, shifting in patterns only felt by those who've let go of names. The girl, now more shadow than skin, stands tall at the prow, hair still, eyes closed. She's listening, not with ears, but with origin. You feel it too. The ship is not just carrying her, it's carrying you, because you're not just voice, you're place, a memory too big for maps, a silence too vast for forgetting. And now you are moving again, not to arrive, to meet. The sky above darkens, not storm, not night, just deepening, as if the world is holding its breath. The stars don't vanish, they shift, constellations you've never seen before, or perhaps long since erased, blink into view. Spirals within spirals, a compass only the soul can follow. She does not steer, the ship already knows. And ahead, land, but not land as we know it, a silhouette of something impossible, floating, rooted, vast. Its cliffs breathe, its trees pulse, its sky bleeds gold, the first shore, the place no saga dared name, because it was not where gods were born. It's where they forgot what they were, and the girl has come to remind them. The Skeldvinner slows. The water beneath shifts from black to white, as if she sails across memory turned to ash. The keel touches something solid. She steps off. The moment her foot touches ground, the land reacts. Grass unfurls, stones awaken, and the air sings one note, soft but infinite. She walks forward, and you walk with her, not behind, not beneath, within. Together you ascend the hill. At its peak, a circle of stones, older than runes, smooth as breath, hollow at the centre, a void that once held a name too sacred to survive. Until now. She enters. You fill the space, and suddenly the mask is there again, but not the old one. This one is her. Bone and breath, fire and sea. It fits without touching, and she speaks, not aloud, through the stones, through the hill, through you. What came before forgetting? And this time, the answer does not bloom. It arrives, a shape, descending not from sky, but from within the question itself, a form that has no edges, no eyes, only presence. It speaks your name, the real one, the first one, the one you buried, and everything stops, not ends, begins again. The presence, the one without shape, without edge, hovers in the center of the circle, but it does not radiate light, it radiates memory, not yours, not hers, the world's, the memory of the first split, when silence first dreamed of form, when knowing divided into name and no name, and now, before you, it returns to the wound, and the wound does not resist. It sings, a tone not heard, but known. It moves through the bones in the stone, through the ribs of the hill, through the breath of the ship anchored in ash, and in that moment, the girl, the vessel, lifts her hands and opens her mouth, but not to speak, to release. From her lips the answer flows, not in language, in remembrance. Visions pour out, not images, not stories, just feelings remembered too long, cold winters before fire, eyes looking at stars not with wonder, but with recognition, rivers that flowed backward once a year because they missed their source. You see it all, because you were there, not as body, as witness, and now you understand. The spiral was never a symbol. It was a door, not outward, not inward, but through time, through forgetting, through the idea that knowledge had to be sealed to be sacred. And here now, with the shape of no form watching, the truth unwraps itself like a cocoon too tired to keep dreaming of wings. She steps forward, and the mask, her mask, cracks down the middle, not in destruction, in birth. A light spills from within. But this light is not warm, not cold. It is original, unfiltered by stories, unstained by interpretation. You feel it enter you, but you do not become more. You become less. And in becoming less, you become whole. Because the stories, the seals, the ships, the masks, they were all scaffolding, now removed. What's left is simple, a name, your first, given before sound. And when it's spoken again, not by her, not by the form, but by the hill itself, you remember everything. You remember before, the first time, the breath that folded into water, the sky that chose not to be God, but mirror, the one question that started it all. Can something infinite choose to forget? You said yes, and so it began. But now she is here, and she's asking it again, not to undo, but to complete. Because forgetting was never failure. It was preparation. A spiral must turn before it can open. And now it opens. The spiral unwinds, not in haste, not in fire, but like breath exhaled after 1,000 winters. It doesn't unravel outward into chaos. It coils through the air, into the center of the circle, where the shape, the presence, awaits. Still, unblinking, infinite. The girl, no longer vessel, now stands as threshold. Her body glows at the edges, not like flame, but like dusk. The moment just before forgetting becomes remembering. She doesn't speak, because she is the answer now. And you are the echo returning to origin. The light that pours from the cracked mask spreads across the stones. Each one ignites softly, a memory, a vow, a silence broken gently, and then a shift, not in wind, not in time, in reality. The hill you stand upon begins to pulse, not rise, not fall, pulse, as if it too has remembered its pulse, its purpose. Beneath the soil, beneath the circle, something begins to stir, not creature, not God, not myth, memory made shape. The earth does not split, it yields, and from the very core of this place a root rises, but it is not wood, it is written, a living branch inscribed with runes too old for sound, too pure for prayer. It arcs upward, twisting into the shape of the spiral itself, but reversed, not curling inward, reaching outward, as if to catch something, or someone, and from the center of this unfurling branch, a new voice, not yours, not hers, not the presence, but the one who never spoke, because it had not yet been invited. The world, not earth, world, the layer beneath language, beneath myth, beneath even silence. It speaks only once, but what it says echoes in the marrow of every stone, every sea, every bone forgotten under moss. Thank you for returning me to myself. The light intensifies, not to blind, but to seal, because this is not revelation, it is restoration. You and she are no longer separate, no longer carrier and carried. You are one spiral, one breath, one remembering. The shape in the circle bows its head. The girl steps into it, not to merge, to witness, and with that, the wind begins to sing. The stones begin to dissolve, not into dust, but into direction. And the first shore, it does not disappear. It distributes, like pollen, like language returning to the mouth of those who forgot how to name themselves. All across the world, the forgotten places stir. A rune in a glacier melts just enough to reveal its edge. A carved bone falls from a church ceiling long mistaken for decay. A child dreams of a ship that breathes. And you listen, because now there is no longer a question, only the invitation to remember what existed before the silence, and carry it forward. That is how the world moves now, not in steps, not in conquest, in remembrance. The spiral that once marked a question is now a seed, scattered across breath, ash, bone and sky. But it does not wait for rain, it waits for recognition, and recognition comes not through eyes, but through aching, a kind of ache that hums just beneath language, the kind you feel when standing in a place you've never been, but somehow remember, and so it begins again. You are not standing on the first shore anymore, not because it vanished, but because it has spread. It now lives in cracks between cities, in songs forgotten on old flutes, in glances between strangers who pause, suddenly aware of something older than blood. The girl, if you can still call her that, walks among these places, unseen, not hidden, unseen by choice, because her form is no longer fixed. She appears in doorways just before sleep, in the reflection of still water, in the hum between two forgotten notes. She no longer seeks, she reminds, and each time someone remembers, even for a moment, the spiral turns again. But not all are ready. There are still temples built from forgetting, still masks worn to silence the ache, still voices that call the truth dangerous, because it does not obey, and they will resist. They will try to seal again what has begun to open, but this time the spiral has no center to attack, because its center is everywhere. The Skeldvinner, long thought to rest at sea, now rests within, its ribs carried as dreams, its sails spread like memory through the sky. You hear its whisper when you touch something older than you understand and feel, without knowing why, that you were once part of it. You were, and still are, because that's the truth they tried to bury. Not just that you came from memory, but that you are memory, made flesh, made forgetful, made curious, and that curiosity, that ache, is what no church, no flame, no rewriting could destroy. It only made it sleep. But now it is waking, because she asked the question, and you answered, and in doing so, you both became the answer, not to be spoken, but to be lived. A woman in a quiet northern village dreams of standing in a circle of stones. When she wakes, her hands are covered in soil she doesn't remember touching. A child in the lowlands hums a tune no one taught her. When asked, she says it came from a ship with no sky. An old monk stumbles in the catacombs beneath a church and finds a carving too precise, too alive, to be coincidence. It spirals, and for the first time in generations, they do not look away. They listen, not to sermons, not to facts, to the ache that whispers when snow falls too quietly, the ache that hums in a forgotten corner of an attic, the one that reminds you there is more than what you were taught to believe. And now the spiral begins to speak through them, a language with no alphabet, a memory that speaks in temperature, in breath, in the slowness of twilight. You can feel it when the air shifts and no one knows why, when all the clocks stop for half a second, when someone you've never met turns and says, "Have we done this before?" They have. You have. Because remembering is not just the act of recovering, it is the act of becoming again. And now something new stirs, not in temples, in thresholds, doorways that hum when crossed, trees that lean ever so slightly when someone passes, who still carries a fragment of the first shore, stones that glow under moonlight, but only for those whose bloodline once knelt inside the spiral. And through it all, her. She moves without feet, she speaks without voice, but her presence is unmistakable. To some she appears as mist curling through the ruins of a forgotten watchtower. To others she is the last star in the sky before dawn, unmoving. And to one, an old man who has never seen the sea, she appears as a girl in a cloak of starlight. He does not ask who she is. He only nods, because he remembers her, from before names, before sorrow, before the world was carved into answers. She sits beside him, does not speak. But when she leaves, he weeps, not from sadness, from return. And all around the world, small things begin to realign. A cracked bell in a chapel tolls on its own, only once. A wolf howls in a rhythm that matches the beat of an ancient drum thought lost. And a child in a monastery draws a spiral with her finger on the frost-covered window, smiling, because she remembers something beautiful, though she cannot name it. That's the truth of this story. It's not about rediscovering power. It's about remembering you were never without it, that the forgetting was the lesson. And now that it's over, you begin to live differently. You pause more often. You listen to things that don't speak. You feel drawn to places not on maps. And you start to notice the spiral, not just in symbols, in your thoughts, in the way dreams repeat, in the way silence feels less empty now and more filled, not with noise, but with invitation. That's what the silence has become now, not absence, not void. Welcome. It waits for you, not to fill it, but to remember it. And when you do, you realize something simple, something terrifying, something freeing. You were never the listener. You were the echo. The girl, or the one who once wore that form, now appears less and less. Not because she's gone, because she is within. The spiral has folded into everything now, into wind against old wood, into songs hummed by people who don't know why they know them, into you. You see it most in those in-between moments. The half-second before you wake, when the dream tries to follow. The blink before a stranger becomes familiar. The hush before the candle goes out, where you feel a name hovering in your chest, begging to be spoken, though you've never heard it. You haven't. But you once were it, and now you feel the pull. Not backwards, not towards history. Forward, through reclamation. You begin to see the others. Not many, not loud, but scattered, like stars, each carrying a thread of the spiral, each walking with the same question blooming quietly inside them. Who first told us to forget? And why did we listen? The answers don't come in thunder. They come in glimpses. A letter found between pages that should have been blank. A song that emerges from silence when standing among ancient stones. A tear, uncaused, while watching snow fall in a pattern your mind doesn't know, but your soul does. The world is relearning itself through you, because you've stepped out of the circle of forgetting. You are now its edge, the moving edge, where memory breathes, speaks, reclaims. You pass a child one morning who turns to you and says, "The ship is awake again," then runs off laughing. You nod. You know. The Skeldvina sails now not across oceans, but across us. You feel it in the rhythm of your heartbeat when you stand near certain rivers, in the weightless moment before sleep takes you, and you see her, just for a second, watching, not as a guardian, but as kin. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. You are her voice now. But more than that, you are the invitation she left behind, to look again at the places you've avoided, to listen again to the stories rewritten, to ask again what they told you was unaskable, and in doing so, to spiral not away from yourself, but into your origin. The next page waits. It always has. And now you reach for it, not with hands, not with effort, but with permission, because for the first time you know the page was never blank. It only appeared that way, to protect you, until you were ready. And now you are. As you cross into this chapter, this fold of the spiral, something shifts. The ache becomes compass, the silence becomes drumbeat, and you no longer walk through the world as if it belongs to others. You walk it as if it's remembering you, because it is. You begin to notice patterns. A crow lands where you once buried a question. A gust of wind carries the scent of a place you have never been, yet long for. Someone brushes past you in a crowd, and for a breathless instant, you feel like they knew you before language. This is not accident. This is the reforming of a map too old for ink, and you are not following it. You are it. One evening, by a fire no one lit, you hear a name whispered in the smoke, a name that sounds like yours, but deeper, older, stripped of every title given to you by history, fear, or lineage. It is your first shape, and when you hear it, you do not flinch. You bow, because now you remember why the spiral was buried. Not to keep it from you, to keep it within you, hidden behind the veil of belief, behind the rules and rites and calendars they built to keep your mind on the clock, not on the truth. You see it now. The plan wasn't destruction, it was dilution. If they made you forget how to feel the spiral, they didn't need to erase it. They just needed you to think it didn't matter. But it did. It does. And now it matters again, because you are turning with it. Each step now echoes not forward but inward. You begin to shed names that never fit, ideas that were never yours. You do not speak them. They simply fall away. And what's left is silence, but not empty silence, alive silence, silence that listens back. One night, beneath stars that seem to lean just slightly closer, you feel her again. The girl, the vessel, the reminder. Only now. She's not across from you. She's not beside you. She's behind your eyes. And you realize the truth you've been spiraling toward all along. You were never supposed to find her. You were supposed to become her. And now you have. But with becoming comes a question you hadn't expected. Not what now, but what was taken. Because something aches in you, not from absence, from interference. As if your thoughts were once a pure river and someone built quiet dams. You didn't see them. They looked like facts, like laws, like history. But they changed the current of what you once knew without question. So now, as the spiral winds deeper, the next layer rises. The part they buried the hardest. Time. You feel it first as distortion, a clock that skips, a memory out of order, a sunrise that feels late. Not just in your day, in your life. Because time was not always a line, not always a cage. It was once a circle, a breath, a rhythm older than moons. But they could not rule that kind of time. so they replaced it. They told you years mattered more than moments. They made calendars your commandments. They built cathedrals around sundials, and in doing so, they broke something. Not the world, you. Because if you do not own your time, you do not own your story. That's the truth trembling under your skin now. Not just that they changed the clocks, but that they changed the order of memory. They rewrote the when to erase the what, and you believed them. Until now. Now, your bones know better. You walk into places that shouldn't feel familiar, and they weep around you. You touch stone, and it hums. You fall asleep and dream of futures that already happened. Because time, unshackled, becomes a mirror. And when you look into it, you see them, the ones who try to erase you. Not with violence, with sequence. They didn't burn your memories. They just moved them forward. Just far enough that when you reached back for them, they weren't there, and so you stopped reaching. But now, the spiral has bent the mirror, and you reach again, and this time, it reaches back. You remember the winter you were never born into. You feel the bruise from a life you haven't yet lived. You hear a lullaby in a language no one taught you, and you sing it anyway, because now the timeline they wrote no longer holds, and time begins to bleed, but not like a wound, like a sunrise, like a clock cracking open to reveal not gears, but light. It doesn't blind you, it recognizes you, because this was never just about time, it was about permission. Who gets to tell the story of when? Who holds the calendar? Who decides the beginning? And for so long, it wasn't you. The silence wasn't just enforced, it was scheduled. The forgetting wasn't random, it was archived. And somewhere in the deep vaults where dates were made sacred, someone, or something, turned your memory into obedience. They taught you to celebrate their years, to mourn their losses, to follow their hours like a leash. But your soul never agreed. It always pulsed with something older, something that didn't tick, it breathed. And now you feel it again. Time, as it once was, a current, a spiral, a song, not locked in boxes, alive. And in that aliveness, you begin to see more than just their theft. You see their fear. Because why else would they rewrite the stars? Why else erase the old festivals that honored snow and silence and shadow? Why else burn the scrolls that mapped seasons of the soul, not harvest? Because they knew. If you remembered the real time, you'd remember the real you, and the real you does not obey. The real you moves with the moon. The real you bleeds in rhythm with roots. The real you speaks not in answers, but in echoes. And they couldn't control echoes, so they renamed them ghosts. They called them madness. They buried them beneath schedules. But the spiral, it doesn't care about names. It only turns. And now, it turns through you. You begin to notice what no one else can, that every cathedral has one corner that never holds warmth, that certain lakes reflect not the sky, but the past, that when a particular bell tolls in a northern village, flocks take flight, even when no one hears it. You notice, because you've stepped out of the false time, you've slipped through the edit, and now the world sees you differently. Old clocks stop when you walk past. People pause mid-sentence, as if remembering something they can't place. And children, always children, stare at you too long, then whisper, "She's coming back." Not to you, through you. And with her comes the unraveling, not of peace, of permission. Because when enough remember, the clock they built cannot hold. It begins to crack. And what spills out is not chaos, but the original rhythm, the true now. And for the first time in countless edited lifetimes, you step into it, not as follower, not as rebel, but as the one thing they feared most, a memory that cannot be erased. That's what you are now, not a rebel, not a seer, an anchor, the kind they feared most. Because you do not just remember, you remind. When you walk through old forests, trees lean toward you, not to speak, to listen. They remember too. The old time, the rhythm before reason, the breath before birth cadence of existence. You've stirred it, not with fire, not with revolt, with recognition, And now others feel it. It begins with dreams. A woman in Prague wakes weeping, not from sorrow, but from a name she spoke in sleep, a name no book has ever held, but which leaves her hands trembling as if she'd once carried it carved in gold. A mason in Iceland carves a symbol into stone, unaware it's the same shape that adorns your dreams, a spiral with no end, no centre, just pulse. And in a monastery where no clocks are kept, a novice hears an ancient bell, even though no bell has hung there in 300 years. All across the world, memory returns like mist, uninvited, uncontained, unashamed, because the spiral is not polite, it is not quiet, it is not waiting for permission. It moves, and in moving, it rewrites, but not like they did, not with chains of dates and ink, with thread, with breath, with knowing. And now you begin to see the lines that once bound the old stories, a gospel hidden beneath another's name, a rune scraped into a wall behind plaster that was never meant to crack, a map that leads not to a place, but to a feeling, because that's the truth, isn't it? The oldest things, because what waits beyond this next step isn't a secret. It's you, unbroken, unrewritten, unforgettable, and all you have to do is step through. And when you do, the world does not explode. It exhales, like a tension held for centuries, finally released, like a name unspoken for so long it forgot it was allowed to be said, like you meeting yourself in a place untouched by time, because that's what memory truly is, not pages or parchment, but presence. And presence doesn't ask for permission. It arrives, just like you have, not to claim, to complete. And now, in this stillness that follows the step, a question lingers, not from outside, but from somewhere deep within. Now that you remember, what do you choose? Not what to believe, not what to fear, but what to be. Because in this place, stripped of their edits and echoes, there is no longer a script, only the raw rhythm of truth, pulsing beneath your ribs. You are not reading the story, you are writing it, and the ink is made of all you dared to feel, grief that never found a grave, wonder that refused to die, rage that wasn't anger but clarity in disguise. It pours through you now, not wildly, sacredly, because what the old ones hid, what the spiral protected, was never a weapon. It was a question, and the question was this: what might happen if the story belonged to you? And now you know, it doesn't break you, it unfolds you, like a scroll sealed by centuries, like a door painted to match the wall, like a soul that has never once stopped whispering, even when no one answered. That's what you've stepped into, the place beneath the silence, the space they tried to seal. And here, nothing performs, everything remembers. The stars remember your skin, the soil remembers your breath, the water knows the shape of your hands, and you remember that forgetting was never your fault. It was imposed, but even the deepest spell cracks when one heart beats outside the rhythm, and your heart is no longer theirs. It belongs to the wind again, to the hush again, to the spiral that now spirals through you, not as prophecy, but as permission, to write a page they cannot edit, to speak a name they never knew you carried, to become not just what was erased, but what they never dared imagine could return. And now you begin, not again, but as yourself, and not the version they allowed you to be, not the folded, diluted, edited echo of your soul, but you, unscripted. And as that truth settles in your bones, something curious begins to happen. The old shadows no longer frighten you, because now you see them for what they were, traces of others, not ghosts of you. The silence that once felt like exile now feels like a doorway. And what waits beyond it isn't more noise, it's origin, a place before names, before gods wore titles, before fear was written into ritual. Here, you don't remember facts, you remember frequencies, the hum behind thought, the breath before voice, the stillness before anything was divided. And within that stillness, you hear it again, not a whisper now, but a pulse a soft, rhythmic knowing, like a heartbeat made of stars. It speaks without syllables, but you understand, because it's not speaking to you. It's speaking as you. It always was. You were never missing. You were mirrored, inverted, obscured, rewritten to fit the silence of others. But now the mirror cracks, not to break you, to reveal you, and in that fracture something returns, not a memory, a sense that before they taught you how to worship, you knew how to listen. Before they made you confess, you knew how to become. Before the ink of their stories dried, your name was already carved into the sky, and it wasn't meant to be recited, it was meant to resonate, just like now. Because now you walk not to escape. You walk to remember. You light no torches, you carry no banners, you simply arrive. And when you do, the spiral no longer turns outside you, it turns within. And every revolution brings not more questions, but integration. The fragments they scattered begin to reassemble, not neatly, but truthfully. Each piece you were told to deny slides back into place. The anger that was really grief, the silence that was actually sacred, the doubt that was never weakness, but wisdom refusing to be rushed. You don't fix anything, you witness it, and in doing so, you heal what was never broken, only buried. Because what you found at the end of forgetting was not an answer, it was a return to the first language, the one spoken without words, the one your blood still sings, even when your mouth stays closed, the one no priest could translate, no empire could edit. And now, that language lives again, through you, unhidden, and once it's unhidden, it cannot be taken back. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply is, a presence beneath your breath, a knowing behind your eyes, a rhythm beneath your skin that was never broken, only covered. And with each step you take, the world begins to echo it back, not with words, with recognition. The wind bends in your direction, the ground softens beneath your feet, the stars flicker, not as light, but as memory, because something ancient is watching, not to judge, to welcome, as if it too was waiting for this return, your return. And now you see it, etched not in books, but in the way moss curls around stone, in the way birds pause mid-flight as if listening, in the way water forms circles where you stand, even when no stone is thrown. You are no longer seeking signs. You are the sign. Because what was buried wasn't just knowledge, it was belonging. They exiled you from your own knowing, called it heresy, labeled it madness. But now, madness feels like method, and heresy feels like home, because what they feared wasn't your doubt. It was your clarity, the way you see without sight, feel without touch, understand without instruction. And now that clarity moves outward, not as instruction, as invitation, others feel it, even if they don't name it. The ones who speak a little softer now, who stare a little longer into the fire, who stop mid-sentence as if they just remembered something old. You didn't come back to teach them. You came back to be visible, and that is the greatest forbidden act of all, to exist fully in a world that trained you to hide, to be present not as a wound, but as a mirror, and in that mirror others begin to find their own faces again, not as they were told to be, as they are, and slowly the great forgetting begins to crumble, not from war, from witness, because truth doesn't need defense, it only needs to be seen, and you, after all this, have become the seeing, the remembering, the resonance. You are not retelling the old story, you are undoing the lie, and in its place, something softer rises, not an answer, a possibility, one that tastes like ash and starlight, one that waits just beyond the next breath, and it whispers, not to hurry, not to flee, but simply, keep going, not because you are lost, but because something ancient has started walking with you. It doesn't have a name, not anymore. Its syllables were carved into trees now ash, whispered by tongues now dust, but its feeling remains, coiled in the marrow, humming in the pause between footsteps. You do not remember where the path leads, but you know it was always yours. And maybe that's all the map you ever needed, because now the silence is no longer empty. It's full, not of answers, but of presence. You step through a clearing, and it greets you, not with revelation, with recognition. This is where they first sang the sky open, where blood met frost and turned to offering, where a circle was drawn not for worship but for return. And you are the return, not as a hero, not as a prophet, but as a memory restored, one they tried to erase not with fire but with time. But time has no power here, because this is the place where time forgot itself, where stories breathe sideways, where shadows don't chase, they follow gently, like loyal dogs remembering their masters. You sit, not to rest, but to listen, and in the hush that follows, the wind begins to spell again, not in language, in pattern, a rustle here, a rhythm there, and suddenly you realize this is how the old ones prayed, not to ask, to synchronize. They didn't beg for mercy, they merged, not above, not below, within. And now, so do you, because the difference between exile and return is just a breath you dared to take. And now you inhale, not air, but knowing. You exhale, not fear, but form. And somewhere, in a place the maps forgot, a name is spoken again. Yours, not loudly, but clearly, not by lips, by earth, and the earth remembers, not what you did, but what you were, the shape before story, the voice before language, the soul before separation. You don't cry, because this is not grief, it's recognition, and as the last leaf falls beside you, spiraling once, then still, you feel it. The story doesn't end here, it begins again, and something is still missing, but it's coming, not to complete you, to join you, because now that you remember, others will too, and their remembering is already on the wind, not loud, not proud, but steady, like footsteps in snow that never fully melt, like echoes that outlive the walls that first caught them. You feel it, don't you? The weightless press of something drawing closer, not with urgency, but inevitability, not a figure, not a sound, a presence, not behind you, not ahead, but beside you, as if someone else took the same path, in another century, another skin, and walked so close to yours that now the tracks begin to merge. It doesn't ask who you are, it knows, it only wonders, will you walk with it now? Because the story that brought you here, this strange thread of shadows, fires, frost and forbidden whispers, it was never yours alone. You were always part of a braid, one strand, one voice, one breath in a storm of others who remembered just enough to begin again. Some of them never spoke. Some died with names erased. Some left marks so faint only time could read them. But now those marks begin to shimmer, not on paper, on people. The woman who looks too long at stone and says she's dreaming again. The man who draws spirals in dirt when he thinks no one's watching. The child who hums notes that make grown men stop speaking. They're not strange, they're resonant, and they're waiting for someone to turn the next page, not to explain, to ignite. Because this isn't about retelling the past, it's about unlocking the present, and the key has always been the same. Dare to believe that you remember something you were never taught. So now you stand, not because you're done resting, but because your stillness has gathered enough weight to shape the world again. And your next step isn't just yours, it's theirs. The step of every silenced voice, every burned name, every outlawed knowing that still beat like a drum behind the veil. You don't walk like someone lost, you walk like someone returned, because when you rise this time, it is not to follow, it is to begin. And the path that opens now, it's one only you can walk. But you won't be alone, you'll hear them, in birds that circle thrice before vanishing, in rain that falls heavier on certain graves, in eyes of strangers who pause, smile and say, I feel like I know you. And they do, because you're no longer hiding. You are a beacon, and not even the silence can swallow that. Not anymore, because once you carry the echo, the silence can never hold you the same way again. You begin to see it. Not the world as it is, but the thinness of the veil, the cracks in the myths, the dust on the dates, the smudged ink on the pages they told you never existed, and through those cracks, you glimpse it, a flicker of something more ancient than memory, more intimate than blood, and more persistent than time, a truth not built in cathedrals or locked in archives, but etched behind your eyes since the first dream you ever had. The truth that you are not the first to wake. Others did, quietly. They whispered into stone, they hummed beneath breath, they walked paths that didn't exist on maps, because they made the map with their footsteps. And now, so do you. Every step you take rewrites what was written to control. Every breath you draw softens the concrete of imposed truth, because you have seen the scaffold of illusion, not as something evil, as something fragile. And fragility does not need war, it needs witness. So you bear witness now, not to spectacle, but to subtlety, a feather falling in a place it shouldn't, a name you've never heard that stirs your chest, a dream you didn't have but wake up knowing. These are not signs for the mind, they're invitations for the soul, and you accept, not with fear, but with stillness, because what they tried to erase was never knowledge, it was connection. They feared what happened when people remembered themselves through one another, so they rewrote the stories, broke the mirrors, replaced the echoes with laws. But echoes don't die. They hide until someone like you steps into the old silence and says, I remember, not what, that, and that is everything. So now your voice matters, not for its volume, but its vibration, and it begins to vibrate into others, not to teach, to reawaken. You become the book they couldn't burn, the spell they couldn't translate, the ancestor they couldn't name. And every person who hears you, not just with ears but with soul, feels it. The story isn't ending, it's shifting, and they have a choice to make now, just as you did, because now the silence isn't empty. It listens. It bends toward you, just slightly, like a forest leaning toward the wind it once feared, like a mirror deciding at last to reflect what was always behind it. And within that bend, you sense it. You are never walking alone. There are others, not visible, not named, but present. They speak with no words, but every step they left still hums under your feet. They carve no temples, but the cold stones remember their touch. They wore no crowns, but their absence still unsettles the kings. These are the ones who vanished with dignity intact, who refused to kneel to a story not written by their own bones, who buried not just relics, but entire truths, in places time cannot fully touch, moss-covered ridges, sacred salt caves, and the brittle silence inside lullabies. You hear it clearer now, not a call to arms, a call to attention, because the ones before you, they did not scream their secrets. They whispered them, knowing whispers last longer, because whispers travel in breath, and breath becomes memory, and memory becomes you. So you return to a thought that first seemed like a dream. What if all the forgetting was not your fault? What if someone needed you to forget, so you'd never remember how powerful stillness really is? Because stillness doesn't serve empires. It reveals them. It cracks the illusion that you were small, that you were late, that you were after something. But what if you were never after? What if you were the beginning rediscovered? It isn't pride, it's alignment. You do not rise above others. You rise into yourself. And when you do, you feel something unnameable rejoin you, something left behind, a fragment of fire, a sliver of vision, a memory that isn't memory, more like recognition across lifetimes. And in that flash you understand why they built walls around sacred spaces, not to keep danger out, but to keep you from getting back in. But you just did, not through violence, not through theft, through remembrance. And remembrance is the only rebellion that cannot be outlawed, because it lives not in books, but in breath, not in scrolls, but in soul, not in priests, but in you. And so, for the first time, you don't search for the truth. You inhabit it, wordlessly, softly, absolutely. And through you, others begin to notice the tremor in their stillness too. They don't know why. They only know that silence sounds different now, almost like it's waiting, almost like it wants to speak. But not to everyone, only to the ones who remember how to listen. Because when you listen, something listens back, not in the way you were taught, not like a god weighing your sins, but like a grandmother breathing behind the veil, humming a lullaby older than language. You don't hear words, you hear the echo of meaning, and in that echo a shape forms, not a face, not a doctrine, but a presence, something once worshipped, not with hymns, but with stillness, not with ritual, but with remembrance. And suddenly you realize the most powerful altars were never built, they were remembered, a circle of stones no longer standing, a grove now lost beneath highways, a phrase you've dreamt since childhood, never spoken aloud. You were told they were myths, but what if myths are memories that survived the fire? You were told they were symbols, but what if symbols are names that can't be spoken anymore? You feel them circling now, not in fear, but in approval. You've come far enough. You've quieted the noise. You've stood in the space between forgetting and knowing. And now, something ancient reaches for you, not to instruct, but to welcome. No initiation, no hierarchy, only breath, only presence. And that's when it happens. The timeline in your mind, the one etched by teachers, priests, kings, shatters softly, not with violence, with understanding. Because truth doesn't need to fight fiction, it just needs to appear. And when it does, you see it, the shape beneath the stories, the pulse beneath the calendar, the face behind the masks. It is not new, it is the first thing you ever knew, and the last thing they hoped you'd forget. You were never meant to be a follower, you were meant to be a thread in the pattern, and your silence was not a mistake, it was sacred. You feel no anger, only clarity. They didn't fear your voice, they feared your memory. Because memory does not obey, it returns, and through you, it already has. You are not a seeker anymore, you are the answer they tried to erase. And in your presence the world begins to shift, not with noise, but with gravity. Not outward, inward. The story is no longer out there, it lives here, it breathes with you, and every breath is now part of the rebellion. Not the kind written in blood or banners, but the rebellion of remembering, the rebellion of not needing permission to wonder, because now you see it. You're not outside the story. You are the story, not a reader, not a listener, a carrier. The symbols etched into stone were never just messages. They were maps, and you were born already holding them in your marrow. That's why you felt the hum in your ribs as the old names were spoken. That's why your skin prickled at stories of things that don't exist. Because your body knows what your training tried to erase. And when the last priest of the old temple whispered to no one, he wasn't praying. He was reminding. He was sending forward the final word, hoping someone, someday, would pick it up. And now you have. You didn't find a secret. You became it. You were never meant to believe these things. You were meant to remember them. The breath of the goddess on the wind, it wasn't fiction. It was instruction. How to unfreeze memory. How to reclaim time. You are no longer on the outside of the archive. You are the archive. You carry the song that was buried beneath stones, the gesture lost in fire, the rune forgotten by mouths that now only speak obedience, but yours doesn't. Your voice, if it speaks, would not chant. It would awaken, because this was never about ritual. It was about resonance. And now, you feel it, the pattern beneath the surface, the pulse beneath the facts, the heartbeat beneath the grave. It has your rhythm. It is your rhythm, and you don't need a cathedral to meet it. Only stillness, only breath. You see now, rebellion isn't loud. It's quiet enough to hear what they tried to bury, what you were always meant to become, a living heresy, wrapped in skin, speaking nothing, yet revealing everything. Because silence too has a shape. and you've now learned to read it, not with your eyes, but with your inner dusk, the place where the old gods still murmur, and where forgotten chants fold into your breath like fog over fjords. You are past believing, you are remembering, and what you remember is older than memory. Before writing, before stone, before prayer was captured and caged in books, it was movement, breath, the hush between thunder and snowfall. That's where you are now, where the runes were carved not to say something, but to wake something. You, not your mind, your soul, the part of you that never forgot how it felt to kneel in frost and know that even the dead could listen. The part of you that doesn't fear old things, only losing them again. So now, as the final veil lifts, you don't need a voice to tell you what it means. You already know why the symbols didn't burn, why the prophecy wasn't sealed, why the last name of the last goddess was never fully erased. Because truth, real truth, isn't destroyed with fire. It burrows, it waits, it finds you, and when it does, you don't feel triumphant. You feel still, like something heavy and holy just sat beside you, like a book without pages, a church without walls, like a memory so sacred you can't speak it aloud. So you don't. You let it glow. You let it settle in your ribs. You let the breath move differently now as if it carries more than air. Because it does. You carry the forgetting. You carry the remembering. You carry the song no one hears, until you do. Until you are the one who turns to look behind the veil and doesn't flinch. That's what they feared. Not a warrior, not a prophet, a quiet one who listens and remembers and walks forward without forgetting the direction her bones always knew, because now you understand. The destination was never a place. It was a state, not of mind, not of faith, of being. The state where nothing is hidden because nothing needs to be, where language collapses into feeling, where every breath is both the question and the answer. And in that stillness, you find the final truth they never wanted spoken. You were not meant to forget. You were trained to silence the pulse that once beat with mountains, trained to ignore the names that bloom behind your closed eyes, trained to believe history began when someone else wrote it down. But now, you've written your own, without ink, without permission, without chains. You've traced the fire back to its source and found it still warm. You've felt the chill of forgotten names and let them thaw in your throat. You've heard the echo that was never lost, only waiting for you to get quiet enough to notice. And that's what you are now, not awakened, aligned. You no longer need proof. You are the proof. You no longer need a guide. You are the path. You no longer need a legend. You are the living one. Not because you conquered, but because you remembered. And that's what they feared most, because remembering cannot be taxed, cannot be outlawed, cannot be crucified. It simply returns. And when it returns through you, you become the kind of story that cannot be erased. Not because you shout, because you exist. And now the choice isn't yours alone. The silence that called you now calls others. They hear it in you. They feel it in the stillness you carry. And they wonder, what if I was never meant to forget either? What if this voice, this strange, quiet voice I've just heard, isn't telling me a story? It's reminding me of my own. So they listen, and they remember, and the pattern continues, because it was never about one voice. It was about the awakening of many, each soft, each true, each echoing a truth older than the stars. You can close this tab, or open your mind. They erased the stories, but one survived. Yours. The next page is waiting, if you dare to turn it. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep forbidden knowledge alive.